Hi, this is Kat, and you're watching Triple Threat Sports.
Hello, Mets fans. I'm back. My last podcast was a analysis of the Matt Harvey injury and how the Mets should not get too down about it and build a strong organization going forward and hope to compete next season. Now, 2014, the last few seasons, has always been sort of a target date for the Mets return to contention. And the main reason for that was that finally, even with the reduced payroll after the Madoff scandal, the reduced team payroll, there was going to be $40 million coming off the books, $42 million coming off the books with the Jason Bay contract and the Johan Santana contract, two players who the Mets gave $40 million to this year who did nothing. They're finally going to be off the books, and that will at least give them some money to spend. It won't be like it used to be. The payroll won't be $150 million, but at least it'll be $90 million with money to spend. So that was 2014. For that reason, has basically been the expectation of Mets fans was 2014 was the year the Mets would be back to contention, at least in some form. Now, going into this season, the idea was the Mets had good young pitching, not only on the major league level with Matt Harvey, but in the minor league level with Zack Wheeler and Noah Syndergaard and Rafael Montero. And that's proven to be the case. Even with Matt Harvey became one of the best pitchers in baseball, but now with his injury, despite his injury, I should say, the young pitching has come through. Noah Syndergaard really shined at Double-A. Rafael Montero really emerged at Triple-A. And Zack Wheeler has been very effective since his call-up in June to the major league level. And going into this season, outfield was considered to be a very big problem, the problem with the Mets. The infield with Ike Davis, Daniel Murphy, Ruben Tejada, and David Wright was considered, if not a tremendous strength, at least a respectable part of the team. Outfield was seen as the real problem, the real need. And the catching position was supposed to be taken over by Travis d'Arnaud, who got injured very early in the season in AAA. He broke his foot, a foul ball went off his foot. He finally was called up in August, and he's been getting his feet wet now, so hopefully, going forward, he'll be the catcher. But outfield was seen as the biggest problem. Well, what happened? The young pitching did okay, did very good, actually. The outfield wasn't really a weakness. The outfield was sort of a strength. Again, not a tremendous outfield, but definitely a strength. Now, before I get into that in more detail, let me just touch upon the rotation going forward. In 2013, this was the rotation. Matt Harvey, Zack Wheeler. When the team played it at its best, say from mid-June on, this was the rotation. Matt Harvey, Zack Wheeler, Dylan G, John Neese. The fifth starter went to a few guys. Henry Mejia was up for a while, then he hurt his elbow. Dice K has been there. Sean Markham was there for a while. Now, just looking at this, going forward, next year, again, we can't count on Matt Harvey. It's not definite that he'll be out, but it's likely. Zack Wheeler, Dylan G, John Neese. I penciled in Rafael Montero. He's in AAA. I have a feeling he'll be up at the major league level. But the point is that Matt Harvey was a dominant starter. Zack Wheeler came up and did well. Dylan G had a bad first half, but he was actually very strong in the second half. He's been good. John Neese was injured for a lot of the first half of the year. He pitched in a lot of cold weather games early on, and he wasn't that effective. But again, he's turned it on also in the second half. So just to get to a starting point of where I think the team is, I expect the team to finish this year with about 72 wins, 72 and 90, which means that they'd have to go now about 7 and 11 the rest of the year, 7 wins and 11 losses the rest of this season to do that. And I'm kind of figuring that it's a good starting point for next year because even with Harvey's injury, you expect Zack Wheeler to step up. Maybe not be as dominant as Harvey was, but still be a frontline pitcher. He was actually a higher rated prospect than Harvey was. If Dylan G can have a solid year, can do what he did in the second half this year for all of next year, or most of it, same with John Neese, that should make up for Harvey's, even though we lost Harvey, that should about even out. So I'm going to assume that if these four guys are in the rotation and no other changes are made, the Mets will be a 72-win team, which is what they'll probably be this year. Now let me go to the board here. This is a list of the players who played most of the time for the Mets this season in their positions. John Buck was the catcher most of the time. Here's Travis, I know he came up in August. Ike Davis and Josh Satin, they shared time at first base. Daniel Murphy was at second. Omar Quintanilla played most of the time at shortstop. Tejada went down with an injury in, I think, late May. And he was in the minors. He's still in the minors as we speak here on September 12th. David Wright was at third base. Now here's where it got interesting. Juan Lagares emerged as a center fielder. He came up in late May, I believe, early June. Eric Young Jr., he came over in a trade with the Colorado Rockies, again in June it was. And Marvin Bird actually ended up having a very good year for him. The Mets got him off the scrap heap in the spring. And you can kind of see by their WAR stats, wins above replacement, that the outfield and the source of the status here, Baseball Reference, most of the time. I also did Baseball Perspective when I felt I needed it. You can see that the WAR for the outfielders, Ron Bird at 3.8, Juan Lagares at 3.8. Now, there's a difference between, excuse me, Juan Lagares is 3.8 was a Baseball Reference. Baseball Perspective gives him a 2.0. And that's actually an important difference. I'll get to that. But I average it out to 3 just to. I average it out to 3 just to, share the difference. Now look closely here. You can see that the outfield really wasn't the problem. Catcher, 0.1. Shortstop, negative 1.6. And by the way, it's very bad when you see negative in front of a wall. I mean, I might as well have been a shortstop. That's how bad it was. So going forward, with the $42 million off the books, with the Santana and the Bay contracts expiring, how do the Mets go forward? Now, our general manager, Sandy Alderson, since he got here, has always proclaimed himself to be a very big fan of offense, power hitting, home runs. And there was always the idea that the Mets would use some of their pitching depth that I mentioned earlier to acquire a Carlos Gonzalez from the Rockies or Giancarlo Stanton from the Marlins. Not going to happen now. With the Harvey injury, they're not going to want to risk that much of their pitching depth in order to get that big power hitter. So, since that path is blocked, what can the Mets do? And we'll start up here, catcher. 0.1 WAR for John Buck, and he was the catcher most of the year. Fortunately, we have the in-house option right here, Travis Darno. Travis Darno was the number 6 rated prospect at MLB.com coming into the season, and again, I said before he got injured. He's projected as a future All-Star pretty much unanimously by everywhere you read. He's 25 years old going in next year, and he'll be the starting catcher. I'm going to assume he starts to fulfill some of his potential. I'm going to give him a WAR of between Travis Darno I'm going to give him between 2 and 3 WAR next season. That's what I project for him. Now, if he regresses, then the Mets made a bet. Then the Dickey trade wasn't as good as we thought, and what are you going to do? But I project this will be his WAR for next year, which will be an improvement, by the way, from Buck. Now, the next thing is Marlon Byrd was traded to the Pittsburgh Pirates a couple weeks ago. So the Mets will have to use some of this $42 million to sign a free agent outfielder, just to break even. Now, Marlon Byrd had a very good year. Now, the free agent outfielders, the top 3 are going to be Jacory Ellsbury, Sin-Chu Chu, and Hunter Pence. Now, their numbers, their WAR stats are comparable. They're all about this level. I had figured that Hunter Pence would be the guy that you want to sign because he does have more power than Ellsbury and Sin-Chu Chu. But yesterday, I'm reading online, and take it with a grain of salt, that Chu is actually the guy they want. So, figuring, I say sign Sin-Chu Chu. I'm going to guess that 4 years, $13, $14 million a year will get it done, I'd say. Something in that range, which would mean there's $28 million left after this. Now this doesn't really make the team any better. This just sort of breaks even with what Marlborough did this year. So it kind of holds that production in place. Now, I'm going to make an assumption again that the Mets are going to give Ike Davis an offer, an arbitration. They're not going to release him outright. They've already said that yesterday. That's how I could tell. I'm going to assume that the platoon is going to stay intact next year, and that Ike Davis will be part of the team. He's not going to be, right now his WAR is 0. I mean, he's basically had no impact at all. I'm going to give him 1 win, which was his WAR last year, 2012. So I'm going to put +1 here. All right, nice one. Now, the big glaring problem now would be shortstop. However, there is a solution. It doesn't involve either of these two players. The Texas Rangers have a shortstop, Elvis Andrus, 25 years old, one of the best young shortstops in baseball, but they have a problem though. They had the #1 rated prospect going into this year in a Jurgensen profile, who is also a shortstop. So they have a lot of talent at that position. They may look to trade Andrus and give Profile the job full-time next year. So if the Mets, what would it take for the Mets to acquire Elvis Andrus? I think I have a package. Lucas Duda, power hitter. He hasn't had much success, but he has a lot of power, and they can use power. Lance Berkman is their DH, and he's getting older. They'd be interested in Duda for that reason. Uma Flores, 21 years old, 22 actually, maybe. Very young player. He was called up. He's been playing with the Mets pretty much every day now for a couple of months. Again, he's struggled now, but he's very young. A lot of potential in that swing. He can also play like a DH role possibly in the future too. And Henry Mejia, young pitcher, good talent. He's having some bones. He's having his elbow fixed. Not a major surgery, a minor surgery this offseason. But again, young pitcher with talent. The Rangers this year have had a lot of injuries on the pitching staff. They could be interested in him too. These two players, and plus you can even throw in another minor prospect that the Mets have, a Corey Manzoni, pitcher in AA. But the point is, get Elvis Andrus here. And we learned that at the conference in Boston, the Southern Metro Conference in Boston, most trades that people propose don't end up happening. But this one I think has a realistic chance if the Mets pursue it. And assuming they do, and assuming they get here, but that's, since he's been competent, since he's been in the major leagues, his WAR has been between 3 and 4 every year. Which, given that the Mets were actually in a negative category, oh, actually this should be here, sorry. In a negative category, this would mean a +4 to 5 wins. Right here. Okay? So if we add this up here, and we're starting from 72 and 90, between 2 and 3 at 74, 75, another one, 75, 76. Now we're looking at 80 wins, about 500 now, assuming they make a trade. Now, actually I'll do it this way. Given that Henry Mejia is not here, and given that they still have money, Andrus has a very big contract. Starting next season, an extension kicks in. He has 8 years left on his contract. 8 years and over $100 million. But next season, I'm not sure how this happened, but next season he only makes $6.5 million, and after that it's $15 million to the end of the contract a year. But he can opt out of the contract after the 3rd year and the 4th year. So even if the Mets don't want him after that, he can opt out. It's not necessarily a concrete stranglehold on the franchise. But he's actually a very good player, so hopefully that'll work out anyway. They still have money to spend. There are about $20 million left. Sandy Alderson has said he wants to sign a free agent pitcher, a good free agent pitcher. And if you look at the list of guys coming out this year, there's Tim Lincecum, who's struggled in recent years. But there's one guy I like, Irvin Santana. The guy pitches 200 innings every year. 2 of the last 3 years he's been an above average pitcher. He's pitching for the Royals this year. they could sign him, I'd say, to a 4-year, $15 million a year contract, which will leave only $5 million left here, but would greatly improve the rotation. This could put that win total in almost to the mid-80s, I would say. You see this?
Yep.
How do you get from the mid-80s to 90 plus? I won't write it, I'll say it. Strong defense up the middle. Pitching, starting pitching, and most importantly, bullpen. Now the Mets have Bobby Parnell as their closer, and I actually, if you saw my earlier podcast, I was for trading him at the deadline this year, but they didn't do it. So, and he had a good year. So if he can have another strong year next year, it's a good closer. Carlos Torres has done some good things in the bullpen this year. At the end of this year, they just traded Marlon Bird and John Buck for Vic Black, who has struggled a little bit since he's come to the Mets, but he's 25 years old. He can throw. He's a cannon for an arm. So hopefully they have a makings of a good bullpen. And bullpens you can never predict 1 year to the next anyway. But if they could put together a strong bullpen, and there's one more wild card in this equation. Matt Den Decker. Like Juan Lagares, and let me actually get back to this for a second. You can see Juan Lagares, his WAR for baseball reference is 3.8, baseball perspective 2.0. Big difference there. And that probably comes down to defense. Measuring defense is not an exact science now, as it is for some. It's not measured as well as yet as other stats are. So when you have a guy who is a Gold Glove defender, it's not always clear. There can be differences of opinion as how much he contributes in WAR. But Matt Den Decker is also a Gold Glove caliber outfielder. Now, to get from the mid 80s to 90 or plus, you have to win close games. Close games come down to bullpen and defense. Matt Den Decker, the fourth outfielder, should be the first guy off the bench every close game. Between him and Lagares out there, play great defense. They should stop. There should be a vacuum out there. They can stop balls in the gap. They can run down. They have both have good arms. Defense like that and a good bullpen can get from 80 to 90, and the Mets can be back in contention. Will all this happen? I think it's possible. This trade, the big card is the trade, the Andrus trade. It's not a pipe dream. They can do it. Texas may want to trade him. Irvin Santana is definitely signable, and you can guarantee they're going to sign one of the three outfielders, whether it's Pence, whether it's Chu, whether it's Ellsbury. I would say not Ellsbury, but they're going to sign one of them for sure. We'll play out the way I say. What to say, Mr. Alderson? It's on you.